Hey, what's going on, guys? Here we are, back again. We are those podcast guys. I'm Kal.
I mean,
And today, give you a guess what we're talking about with
yeah,
like all the stuff that we have going on in the background. You know, um, we have a new TV show that at the time of this recording, only 2 episodes have come out on Disney Plus. I have not checked it out yet, but
nor have I.
I hear I've heard some things,
Yeah.
but I'm not gonna lie. 2025, I'm pretty well spoiled to the whole binging a TV show, so I'm not like I like to let shows build up now. But yeah, I'm talking about Daredevil: Born Again, a very anticipated return to old Hornhead coming back and everything. But you know, there was a time that old Daredevil was not super popular, and
Yes.
and he was on the verge of multiple times of the title getting canceled.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And think we're going to talk about someone that we're both fans of and everything. Really, the man that saved Daredevil.
And I honestly think more than that, he didn't just save Daredevil. He created the version of Daredevil that the world is pretty much familiar with.
Pretty much, yeah. He pretty much took this character that everyone was like very mediocre sales.
Poor man Spider Man.
Multiple publicists was basically like, we need to kill the title. It's not doing well or anything. And then, yeah, pretty much the version of Daredevil that we know, the mythos behind the character, came from one individual. And we're not going to talk about his entire run
No.
on the character because that's an episode in and of itself.
At least one episode.
Yeah, but we're going to talk about one particular run that I think
if you start anywhere,
if you start it, which is weird because it's like it's kind of at the end of his run.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
like he went to the beginning at the end,
Yeah.
but I think it's still like a very good starting point.
Oh, absolutely.
So, yeah, we can
talk about The Man Without Fear.
Yep,
by Frank Miller.
Frank Miller, one of our favorite creators. Not always the case with me. Like
that'll be fun to go into. So.
Yeah, like and I'll go more into detail with it because one day we're gonna do. Look, this may be the beginning of like a big deep dive into Frank Miller's work between you and me.
Because you don't have to twist my arm, dude. I've got most of his career.
Yeah, because like I said, I used to not be the biggest fan of him. I'm not going to go into super big detail with it, but not going to lie, there's no other way to really put it other than I was a butthurt Superman fan. Did not like the way he treated Superman in The Dark Knight Returns. He made no secrets about that he just did not care for Superman all that much, and for a lot of Superman fans, like really felt like okay, you're just kind of making it your life mission at this point to
right.
to hate on this character and all that kind of stuff. And so yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm not the biggest fan of his art style. I think it works sometimes, but for the most part, like I look at a lot of his artwork and I'm just like, like that's just me. Well, I mean, it's not just me. There's lots of people that don't like his artwork.
Yeah.
But that's just my opinion.
I actually, I've always liked his artwork. I like the fact that it's almost kind of like ugly at times. And in some ways, it reminds me of how Kirby's artwork progressed. If you look at his work on like early Fantastic Four, it's a heck of a lot cleaner. And then you look at his stuff with like Fourth World and Etrigan and Commandy, it's rougher. The lines are thicker. You know what I mean? It's a little scratchier. And that's kind of what it reminds me of, how just over time Kirby developed this kind of visual shorthand, and I feel like Miller in a lot of ways has done the same thing.
Yeah. So yeah, again, not always the biggest fan of the man for me. Like I had read The Dark Knight Returns.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the first times I really jumped into like, okay, let me check this out, regardless of how I feel about it, was whenever 300 was coming out. So I was like, okay,
Yeah.
let me check out the source material on that. And that was like really the first thing of his that I was like, okay, this is pretty good. Like, like I like this. And, obviously, you know, talking about Daredevil, we very briefly, I have this set aside. We'll jump more into that here, later on. I'll tell you what's coming down the pipeline for that. But the last episode we did, talking about like the Fox X-Men movies and all
Mm-hmm.
that, we very briefly touched on Daredevil and Elektra. Um, Very much a lot of stuff from Frank Miller in that film.
Oh yeah.
And so whenever it's like I watched the movie and we talked about it in the last episode, I've got no problem telling anybody that I like that movie. I love that movie. And so, start digging in, doing research and everything and all that, start finding out like this guy that I don't like had a lot to do with the movie that I love, and it's like, dang it,
He even cameos in the movie.
yeah, and so I'm like, I was like, okay, so um I honestly can't remember the first time I read this. I really can't. Um,
I actually, I had heard about it before it was coming out. I was, already familiar with
mhm.
Miller's work and was a Daredevil fan. Um, but I remember buying the first issue of the miniseries, like at my local comic shop as
Okay,
soon as it came out.
okay. It came out 94.
93, 94,
Yeah,
something like
okay,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
somewhere in that window. But yeah. So you and I have talked about it because we're pretty much we've had a Daredevil week, really. You
Yeah.
you and me.
Yeah.
Like, we've had a lot of discussion about Daredevil. We've consumed a lot of Daredevil media and all that, because just to give you guys a glimpse behind the curtain here and there, Ian and I record 2 episodes at a time, just because life gets in the way.
Yep.
I've got a kid. We both have like full time jobs and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, it's not as simple as just, and also there's a pretty good distance. Like, you're like, what, a 30-minute drive from me?
Uh,
Somewhere in
30,
that.
40
Yeah,
minutes, something like
depending
that.
on the traffic and all that kind of stuff. So it's not as simple as just, let's get together, And so, with his work schedule, he's off every other weekend, pretty
Mm-hmm.
much. And so it's not as simple as just like, hey, let's get together, record this or whatever. So whenever we have free time, which is pretty much every other weekend,
Mm-hmm.
we just get together and it's like, okay, we're gonna this is what we're doing, and we'll record 2 episodes back to back and all that.
I even bring like a change of shirts.
Yeah.
So
to make it seem more legit.
yeah, yeah.
But
The passage of time.
yeah. Like, as soon as we end one episode, we're like,
Yeah.
put the next one like, okay, hey, welcome back, everybody. But yeah. So we were kind of talking about like, well, what are we going to talk about? What are we going to do? And everything. And we've been, not gonna lie, at just about every episode that we've done so far, it's just been very, oh, let's talk about this.
Yeah, yeah.
We've done very little research, very little.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just everything is just, we're just throwing it off the top of our head.
Yeah,
like,
this
oh
is
yeah, let's talk about that.
off the cuff, seat of our pants. We don't have any rehearsal.
No.
It's just like, what are we going to talk about? This? Okay, yeah. Bloop.
Hit record, like, hey, this is what we're talking about today. But this is pretty much the first time that you're the one that said it. We were on the phone and you had said like, I think we've kind of hit our limit of just
stuff that we can just spitball.
Stuff, yeah, just like whatever. And like, so now it's to the point of like what there needs to be prep.
Yes.
Like, what are we going to actually talk about and deep dive into and discuss and all of that. And
well, and
the Daredevil movie was on my mind just because of the previous episode. And yes, Born Again was coming out. We're both Frank Miller fans. And so it's like,
You're welcome, by the way.
For what? Wait.
Well, I feel like I'm somewhat instrumental in you being an actual Miller fan as opposed to just a Daredevil fan or a
Yeah.
Dark Knight fan.
Yeah, no. Like you would recommend certain things to me. You let me borrow certain things and all that. Specifically that issue that we'll jump into later on. But yeah. So we got to talking like, hey, what are we really gonna discuss? And we've talked about doing like a Frank Miller themed episode,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm talking like whenever we go to do it, it's going to be like, I hope you guys like Frank Miller.
Yeah.
Because whenever we go to do it, it's going to be like, okay, we're going to do an episode of this is just a very run of the mill. We're going to kind of cover his, like, a very Frank Miller themed episode like that. This is how he got started. This is how he, jumped on the Daredevil, this and that, and all that kind of mess. But then we're going to like, start jumping into individual stories of his
Mm-hmm.
for other episodes. Like, today we're going to talk about the Dark Knight Returns, and this episode like more of a deep dive into Strikes Back or the Master Race, or
that's going to be so much fun covering just the DK universe.
Oh yeah, year one, like all that kind of junk, and jumping
All
into
Star.
like. All Star is gonna be something, let me tell you. I've got the absolute copy of it, so I've got big pictures for show and tell. But I mean, we're gonna jump into like with RoboCop, all that. We're gonna cover all that stuff, and so we've talked about doing it for a while, and so we're finally to the point of like, okay, we need to do some prep work, deep dive. Like, what are we gonna do? Just not too long ago talking about Daredevil, Born Again, kind of at the tip of everyone's tongues and all that kind of stuff. Like, let's talk about literally the man that saved Daredevil.
Yes.
Because while we're not going to cover his entire run, and like I said, this is pretty much the end of his run, Daredevil would not
be what it is.
It wouldn't. Like he was Daredevil was on the verge of becoming one of those characters that's just like everyone kind of forgot about.
Well,
like
I know that at the time Miller was brought on to even draw Daredevil.
He was just a backup, wasn't he?
Well, the main guy had left. They brought on Miller, and he just drew the issue. Drew the title for only a few issues, and then took over as writer artist. And he was one of the first writer artists at Marvel.
Well, he took over as writer because didn't he threaten to quit? He's like he didn't like the direction that the current writer was doing or going in or something.
I don't remember if he had threatened to quit. I do know that he had voiced, "Hey, I have some very definite ideas about what we can do."
Yes, he did.
and the title was explicitly on the verge of cancellation.
Oh yeah, like they wanted it canceled.
Yes,
and I think it was one of them deals to where it was very much like, hey, we got this new guy, Miller. He's got some ideas. Let's let him. It was basically like the title's already failing.
Right.
Let him try what he's wanting to try.
Let the kid get his feet wet.
Yeah, like
bit,
if it ends up being popular, okay, we've got a popular title. If it ends up falling on its face, it's not like the title was already doing bad anyway. So it's like just let him do what he was gonna do. And boy howdy, he changed everything we know about Daredevil.
Oh yeah.
Like you said earlier, like pretty much what we know of Daredevil today is from him.
And not just that, he also, I think, modernized a lot of the language of comics. And I'll go into this a little bit whenever we go into this single issue that we're going to highlight. But before Frank Miller, Marvel Comics were extremely wordy, a whole lot of exposition and stuff. And with Miller, he was very influenced by like Mickey Spillane, the Mike Hammer stories, very pulpy stuff. And so it was more of a show me, don't tell me. And so he streamlined. I mean, there are a lot less captions, and everything is more in the dialogue itself than in all of these captions and everything else. And stuff just flowed very quickly. And I think, I mean, he didn't invent it by any means, but Miller introduced a heck of a lot more silent panels and fight scenes into the comic. Almost like it was like he married martial arts and ballet, on the page.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that always stood out for me is, your Alan Moore comics, as much as I love Moore, they can sometimes be a chore.
Yeah.
And Miller's stuff seems to flow a lot more quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like I said, I can't really remember when it was that I first read this. I will say that this was my starting point for Frank Miller's run on Daredevil.
Okay.
Like,
okay.
Just was like, okay, let's check this out. Like, this is at the time, it's like I didn't know that it was the end of his run. Like whenever I was really, I've talked about it in previous episodes before, that whenever it's kind of like whenever I finally found a way to be able to consume comics, I was not concerned with reading order or anything like that. It was just like, oh, here's this. I'm gonna this is what I'm reading this weekend or whatever. And yeah, can't remember like when it was that I read it, but I remember reading it. It was possibly my introduction to Ramita's artwork as well.
Mm.
And yeah, I don't have hardly anything negative to say about this run. Like it or this particular story, the run really as well. But today we're just really talking about this specific arc and all that, and one issue in particular.
I will say quickly, I know that John Romita Jr.'s artwork is not beloved by everyone.
Certainly not beloved by me.
But I do think his artwork goes very well with Miller's writing. Because to me, there's almost like a commonality in their artwork. It's both of them kind of have this like, whenever there are moments of beauty, it's like a rough beauty. But a lot of the times it's this scratchy, ugly, you know what I mean? More realistic.
I think to compare their artwork directly, I would say that Romita Jr.'s artwork is just very much like a cleaner version of Miller's artwork.
Yeah.
Yeah. But other than that, I mean, they're extremely similar to one another. So I think it's very easy to like, oh, Miller's not gonna pin this himself. Well, who are you gonna get? Romita Jr. Oh, well, okay.
Yeah.
That's same. Same thing.
Yeah.
Basically. So yeah. A lot of what we know about Daredevil, especially his origin, comes like we had never really gotten an origin for Daredevil prior to this, to my knowledge.
I mean, as far as I know, Daredevil had never been given the year one treatment, and this is absolutely what this is.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, like what it is without calling it that. This is Daredevil year one.
Yeah.
Like I mean, but it covers a lot of ground.
Oh yeah.
Like it very much like again, a lot of inspiration from this became that. And you pretty much get from Matt late teens all the way to, well, pretty much whenever he becomes Daredevil that we all know and love, and all that. I don't know if you haven't read this, I absolutely say, give it a shot. especially if you're in the mood to want to check out more Daredevil stuff and everything, just because of the new season of Daredevil coming out and all that. Again, this is a very good jumping point in. I read it for the first time in a good many years in preparation for this episode,
Mhm.
and man, I forgot how much I enjoyed it.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah. And I was telling you last night there are some things I wanted to highlight. Um, one thing's one thing I've always loved about Miller's writing is he'll take these little phrases and they recur throughout the story.
mm-hmm,
Like Matt is very sneaky. Matt is very very sneaky. You
mm-hmm.
know, all that kind of stuff. Um, but there's one point where he's been blinded and
Spoiler alert.
but like okay, talking about Miller bringing like the silent stuff into comics. I don't know how well you can see that. There's no dialogue here, but it's beautiful. It's like ballet. Two characters running in the night, running across rooftops. Even like a double page spread of Matt and a Stick there, who is a badass character in his own
Yes,
right.
yes, he is. I thought they did stick very good justice in season 1 of Daredevil whenever it was originally on Netflix
Mm-hmm.
before it jumped over to Disney Plus.
That was honestly one of my only issues with the Affleck movie. Was no Stick.
Yeah.
Um,
Which, we'll jump into that later, because just going to go ahead and let y'all know. This episode we're talking about, this particular arc for Daredevil. The next one is we're really going to jump into and do like a full-blown like deep dive into the Daredevil movie. And we're going to talk about, again, I love the film, but we're going to talk about its some people may not view it the same way, but we are going to talk about the highlights of the film. We are going to talk about the lowlights of the film. And
yes. Yeah.
like,
yeah. Like, I mean, just because we love the film doesn't mean we think it's faultless.
oh yeah, no, it's got problems.
Yeah.
I've got no problem saying that it's got problems. But the reason why we decided to pretty much do a double thing to talk about this and then to talk about the film was, I remember whenever I told you, I was like, well, the second episode we can talk about the movie. And you were like, well, we kind of already talked about the movie like in the other one. And I was like, yeah, but we didn't really do like a big comparison of like the movie to Frank Miller's work. Yeah. And I was like, I really think we can do that. And then that's whenever you were like, oh yeah, like yeah, let's do the comparison of like Miller's work to the film and all that, because Miller's work has more of a hand in this film than a lot of people know.
Oh
about.
yeah,
Because yeah, I mean we'll jump into the movie later on, but
real quick, I just wanted to say, I don't think Miller gets enough credit, like as a writer. I mean, a lot of people love his stories, but a lot of that could just be plotting. You know what I mean? But his actual writing, Matt's at college, laying in bed, he's restless, and Frank's just writing about how the outside world is calling to him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it roars down concrete canyons and brittle branches clatter in combat. Surrendering winter leaves that rustle and skitter like fairies, begging Matt to join in the dance. That is beautiful.
Yeah.
That is beautiful.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And again, like Miller is absolutely the man who saved the Man Without Fear. And so much of what he did with Daredevil, like, again, this was the end of his run. He had essentially already saved the character. There were other writers that had taken over the title at this point in time. And, did their own spin and came up with their own stories and all of that kind of stuff. And then it's basically like, hey, Miller, come finish what you started kind of thing. But start at the beginning. And that's what he did. And this story came about. And it was in this particular arc that we get to see the whole, like, I mean, it had kind of been talked about and mentioned like here and there and all that, but we get to see like in detail the whole bit with like his dad is a
Mm-hmm.
boxer. Like we get to see like where he gets the name Daredevil from, like why
Yeah.
he chooses the name specifically Daredevil to be called that and all of that, and we get to see like what happened to his dad, what was the reasons for him doing what he wanted to do and all of that. And obviously we're talking about spoilers here, but it's like, what one thing that I love about this is that it very much humanizes Matt more than just like, okay, he's Daredevil, he's always been Daredevil. Like, I mean, like, he really became Daredevil just because it's like, oh, I'm here for work,
Yeah.
kind of starts getting pulled back in.
Yeah.
And then it's like, it kind of reminded him why he wanted to become a lawyer.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then it's like by now he's realized doing things the right way, with the justice way, doesn't always work out. So he has to do it a different way.
Yeah.
and so he's very much, I love it because it's very much like he's on opposite ends.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
gonna try to do it the right way first. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, well, I'll catch you later.
Yeah.
Like,
And
and you don't want to get caught by him later.
right. And so I do think Miller is largely responsible. I mean, Matt was already a lawyer and stuff, before Miller came along. But, the phrase poor man Spider-Man gets tossed around a lot. And then Miller brought in the martial arts angle
Mm-hmm.
and the Catholic angle, which is now like one of the defining features of Daredevil.
Mm-hmm.
Is he's riddled with Catholic guilt.
Oh yeah, like riddled with Catholic guilt. So much like Catholic, not just Catholic, but even just like God and all of that kind of, just any like religious symbolism
Yeah.
and all that that's thrown in there. Like, again, talks about like, very much walking that fine line of being on different ends of the spectrum, to where it's like he has very much like Catholic roots and all of that, but yet he's the devil, like,
Yeah.
like, yeah, I freaking love it.
But no, so a few years had passed since since the Born Again storyline,
Mm-hmm.
and the Born Again storyline, I think Miller done that right after Batman Year One, I believe. So it had been a few years since Miller had done some Daredevil, and basically he calls up the Marvel offices and he's like, "Hey, I want to do Daredevil again." And they're like, "Well, the 30th anniversary of the character's coming up around the corner." He's like, "Hey, sounds great." And he's like, "I've got some ideas." And so basically, like you said, like we had never seen, Daredevil be given the widescreen like Year One treatment,
Mm-hmm.
and this was very much Miller's gift to the fans.
Well,
For
yeah,
that.
because I mean, at this point in time, Daredevil just, he was one of them characters that created by Stan Lee,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just kind of like, here he is.
Yeah.
No origin, no really nothing. Just like, okay, here he is. He's a character, and he had his own title. He would show up here and there in a few other titles,
Mm-hmm.
kind of, and all that. But there was nothing really about Daredevil that stood out. And then, Frank comes in, has his ideas, introduces so much that we know about Daredevil today. And like, yeah, like, really, for the first time, I don't know if it kind of clicked in his head, kind of, to where it's like, I've introduced all of this stuff to the character. I've kind of reinvented him and all of that, and it's like basically like nobody really knows where he began.
Well, I mean,
Like, let's jump into that.
I mean, I think we always knew, the radioactive liquid hit his eyes as a
Yeah.
child, and the whole moral conflict between his being a lawyer and a vigilante was always there. But like, have you ever read any like Silver Age Daredevil? Okay, it's like the first time I encountered some Silver Age Daredevil was reading some Silver Age Spider Man as a kid.
Mhm.
I think it was Amazing Spider Man issue 16 or 17. He's fighting the Circus of Crime, and I know you know what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
And Daredevil jumps in, and he was still in the yellow suit at this time,
Mhm.
and oddly he's like cracking wise alongside Spider-Man. It's very odd
Yeah.
if Miller's Daredevil is what you're used to,
Yeah.
you know. And then I mean his villains, if you could call them that, like Owlman, Stiltman.
I'm aware of Stilt Man.
I mean,
Like, what's his gig? He's on stilts.
yeah, like I would imagine before Miller, probably Daredevil's most fearsome foe might have been Gladiator, the guy with like the saw blades on his wrists.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
I've never read Silver Age Daredevil, but I'm aware of Silver Age Daredevil. And it was some dark times. Like, it's obvious. You look back at that kind of stuff and it's like you see why the character was in the trouble that it was in,
Oh yeah.
and why it was a very just mediocre title that nobody was, the vast majority of people were just like, we don't care about, because it was like little gimmicky junk like that, like,
Yeah.
I mean, I get during the Silver Age there was a lot of very hokey things whenever it comes to comics. There really was. Some of the stuff with Daredevil though was like next level. Okay, like
Yeah.
Stilt Man.
Yeah.
Like that's one of them deals where it's like this is the best that you got. You know, like,
Yeah.
like, hey, who's he going up against this week? Oh, Stilt Man. Well, what's his thing? He's on stilts. And somebody said, okay, that's how little they cared about the character, to where nobody was like even really like. I mean, put a little bit more thought into it than that. It was just like, whatever.
Well, I think there's actually a little more to it than that. It was the fact of comics were not regarded as literature of any kind at the time.
Mm.
It was, what are we going to do this month? What are we going to toss the kids this month?
Yeah, because at that point in time, comics was still very much like being consumed by children and all of that. I mean, it was, you know, around the time of like, with Frank Miller's thing with like the Dark Knight Returns and all that, to where it was like, what was the tagline? Like, not just for kids, or something like
DC
that.
Comics are not just for kids.
Yeah, something like that. And so, yeah, like comics was still very much, for children at that point. And so, like, on one hand, it's like you kind of get like, okay, but
Well, that and like, was there? I mean, there. So Stan Lee at the time, who was actively still writing some comics, um,
actually writing them.
yeah, um, he was trying to get across some of his serious storytelling, but those were mainly relegated to Amazing Spider-Man, Silver Surfer, and I'm guessing what him and Jack and Roy Thomas did with Thor. I think that's about, and Fantastic Four. But after, I mean, Jack left, and shortly thereafter Stan left the Fantastic Four. But to me, Stan Lee's serious storytelling is pretty much limited to FF, Spider Man, Silver Surfer, and what he let Jack do on Thor. And
Yeah.
and this was just another title giving Marvel real estate on the stands.
Yeah, pretty much. So then they bring in Frank. He works his magic. makes it more serious, makes it more dark,
Mm-hmm.
decides to bring in, brings in the Hand, pretty much plucks. He's like, okay, well, he's basically like Daredevil needs a villain,
Like a big bad.
yeah. We're not talking like who's he going up against this week, who's he
Right.
going up against after this arc is done, who's he going like he needs somebody that's like Joker to Batman, Lex to Superman. Like
Green Goblin to Spider
he
Man.
needs somebody like that, and so he reaches into the Spider-Man vault and yanks out Kingpin.
Yeah. Yes, Kingpin was originally a Spider-Man villain.
And throws him into the Daredevil world. And let me tell you,
it fits like a glove.
Oh yeah, like I think it's very easy, especially nowadays, like with the Netflix show and all that kind of stuff. Kingpin is much more viewed as just a Daredevil villain at this point than a Spider-Man villain. Like I'm sure there's a good many of fans out there that's not fully invested in reading the comics like we are and all that. That would be shocked to be like, Kingpin started out as a Spider-Man villain, but yes, he did. But now, we're very familiar with him being a Daredevil fan, to the point to where, we have the Ben Affleck movie, Kingpin is the villain of the film. Mm-hmm. We have
the series,
like, with Netflix. Like, okay, this is going to be our first venture into a live action Daredevil post what was the disaster that was the Ben Affleck film. So it's like, that should let you know just how much Kingpin is the main villain for Daredevil, to where it's like, hey, we're revisiting Daredevil, who's the villain gonna be? Immediately it was just Kingpin. Like, we're gonna rehash this. Like
and okay. One of my complaints with Daredevil comics post Frank Miller era is that a lot of writers, not all, seem to want to tell the same kind of story over and over.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, let's bring in Kingpin. Oh, he finds out Matt's identity. Oh, Matt loses his license. Again? You know, like
it's like oh, he loses his license. He has to leave New York. Oh, where's he going this time? It's because he's left before. I mean, he left before Frank jumped on board. Like, he had gone to California or something. I can't remember exactly where it was, but they had tried relocating him before, and then Frank, was like, no, let's put him.
It's got to be New York.
Yeah, like, I mean, and even we see that in this. Like, we had an origin to where he was. Dang it, and I just read it. Like, where was it? Boston?
Yes, he was. He had got a job post-college at a law office in Boston, very prestigious law firm. And he's about to become junior partner, the youngest junior partner ever. But he has to bring a brief back to New York and ends up wandering into Hell's Kitchen. And kind of like that line from The Godfather Part 3, he's like, just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
That's right. Because, he goes in and, just Matt being Matt, starts going to his old stomping grounds and all that stuff, goes back to the gym, finds somebody there, like, okay, we're gonna work out and all this kind of stuff. And like, just as he's there, meets up with Foggy, like, first time we see Foggy in a while and all that stuff. And, it's like, like he was very much just there just to be there for a little while.
Yeah.
But then, like, like you said, like, he got pulled back in to where it's like he gave up a very prestigious job and all of that. But let's be honest here, that's something that Matt would do, though, because it's like, okay, this is a very prestigious law firm that, like, I'm about to jump into. But at that point, he would just become any other lawyer. Yeah. Where it's like, this is just a client. This is just a payday and all that, which, I'm gonna, like, it's cool that he stayed, starts the law firm with Foggy and everything, because one of my favorite things about this movie was whenever you see, like, how they're getting paid.
Yes.
It's just like, he's like, oh, one of our clients decided to pay us today. It was a fish fish. He gave us fish,
Flute.
And you look all around, like in the background of that office, and there's basketballs, and there's
I love the part where he's like, every time I walk in, it looks like Sanford and Son. And,
Yeah.
I'm waiting for Lamont to come around the corner.
But like he knew that if he went back to that very prestigious law firm, he was just gonna be a run of the mill lawyer. He was gonna be a lawyer that everyone hates. Like, you're just a paycheck to me.
Right.
Like, is he guilty? Is he innocent? Who cares? I need to win the case so that I get paid. That's basically all he was gonna be. To go back to Hell's Kitchen was literally just, I'm going to give a voice to the voiceless. I'm going to help those that can't be helped, that won't be helped, that nobody wants to help.
Yeah, him going back to Hell's Kitchen was a homecoming in more ways than one.
Mm-hmm.
It was a homecoming geographically, morally, because, like you said, if he had stayed in Boston, not only would he have never been Daredevil, he would not be the same moral person that we know.
Mm-hmm.
And him coming back, running into Foggy, everything else, that was destiny.
Yeah, pretty much. And, so in this story, we get to see, like, how him and Foggy meet, how he is doing his own thing, like, how his father dies. We get to see the whole bit about how he's wanting to get out of Hell's Kitchen. He gets pulled back into Hell's Kitchen. We get to see the origin of him and Elektra's love story,
mm-hmm.
and all that.
Yeah, because during Miller's initial run in the early 80s, all that was said was, oh, she knew Matt in college.
Yeah.
But it was never really shown.
Yeah.
And so here we...
Well, I mean, it was also pretty much like, isn't there a tagline on one of the issues or something? I can't remember exactly what it is. Like, once they, like, I can't even remember how it goes. It was something very of its time. Like a subtitle that's like they knew each other before, but now they're enemies, or or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it is.
I want to say that was the cover of like one of her first appearances, where she's like almost like silhouetted with like lightning behind her.
Yeah.
And Matt is like in the foreground, like halfway profile, and Elektra's like up here, and there was a little caption on the cover. It said, her name is Elektra, and it's actually famously misspelled on the cover. But yeah.
But yeah, God, I freaking
no. Like, this is, to me, this book is just the essence of Miller's Daredevil distilled into a superb origin story.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you've never read Daredevil, if you've never read Frank Miller, you see a little bit on TV, you'll be like, I want to, maybe dig into that a little. There's no better place to start than The Man Without Fear.
Oh, absolutely. Like, it's one of those origin stories that, like, it goes hand in hand with the character at this point. But, like, even to the point to where you look at other forms of media, the movie, the TV show, or whatever. It's like, well, what's his origin going to be? Like, Miller's origin.
Yeah.
And it's like, are we going to take some liberties? Are we going to come up with... No. It's Miller's origin. Give it to him. Like, it goes as hand in hand with the character as Spidey was bitten by a spider.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Superman is he comes from Krypton. Like, Bruce's parents were murdered before his eyes. Like, it's one of those origins that's like, once it was assigned to him and it was done so well, it's just like, that's his origin. We're not going to deviate from it. We're not changing it or anything other than like multiversal, crap or whatever. Yeah. But as far as like main canon continuity or doing other like adaptations like TV or movies and stuff like that, like, They don't deviate from. I mean, they little details here and there, but for the
Right.
most part, it's like it's Miller's origin.
Mhm.
Like they stick with it. Um, they very much stick with it with this movie. They very much stuck with it with uh, with the Netflix show prior to it jumping to uh Disney Plus and all of that. The ultimate Daredevil stuff that I have set up there. We don't really get to jump into Daredevil's origin a whole lot because that's much more. It's called Daredevil and Elektra, but it's much more Elektra and Daredevil kind of guest stars or whatever. Really, like, I mean, they meet in college in
Yeah.
there and everything, and for the most part, it's really like just her doing her thing. She interacts with Matt a lot.
Mhm.
Not a whole lot of interaction with Daredevil or whatever, but what we do see, even in the Ultimate Universe of Daredevil, because it is very much still kind of like a year one, maybe even a year two for Matt in that story or whatever. Like, oh, what costume does he use? Black with the mask,
Yeah.
like Miller's
Yeah. Yeah.
origin. So it's like yeah, it's like that's how hand in hand to where like I told you before we started recording with the Ultimate Daredevil stuff is like Daredevil never really got a whole lot of big special treatment in the Ultimate Universe. But it was also one of them deals to where it's like, in the Ultimate Universe, what's one of the big things about the Ultimate Universe is changing things up, changing the status quo, like, race swapping, like just making it different
Right.
and all of that. Daredevil's like in the Ultimate Universe, he's like indistinguishable really from his 616 version. Like he really is. Like there's not a whole lot of difference. Like down to his origin, what his costume looked like, what his regular Daredevil costume looks like. Why mess with perfection?
Yeah.
You know?
And I would almost say to anyone, if you want like a Daredevil reading order, I'd say start with The Man Without Fear, then go back to the early 80s Miller run, and then that includes, well, just his run on Daredevil, The Man Without Fear, and then there was a graphic novel with Bill Sienkiewicz called Daredevil Love and War. And then you can jump to Elektra Assassin, and then what is it? Born Again, and then from Born Again, uh, you can go to Last Rites by Lee Weeks, and then you can skip a few years and go to Guardian Devil,
Mm-hmm.
and then Father, uh, Shadowland, Fall from Grace, Shadowland, End of Days.
um Born Again. I remember whenever the Netflix show had started and the job that I had at the time. I was the resident nerd. Like, I mean, some of the other guys they would watch some of the movies here and there and all that stuff, but they didn't know anything about like the source material and all that. And so I remember whenever the Netflix show started and one of my coworkers would watch it, and he was head over heels for Karen Page, and because of the
I can't
actress.
blame him. Yeah.
Me neither, and all that kind of stuff. And he was talking about like how much he loved her and this and that and everything. And I said something like, depending on how far this show goes, I was like, you may not like her that much.
Yeah.
And he was just like, oh, there's nothing that can happen. I was like, I was like, don't say that. She absolutely has a fall from grace in Born Again. Like,
Well, and really, okay. There's, I wouldn't say a redemption for her character in Born Again. There's a forgiveness.
there's absolutely a forgiveness. There's no redemption.
And
Like
then
in my opinion, it was very much like I think
and then her character just craps the bed in Guardian Devil.
like to me, I think it's just with her with the forgiveness that happens in Born Again. I think it was one of those cases to where it's like we need to have them be on good terms again. Like, how are we going to do that? Like, oh, she's like, I'm sorry. Like, yeah, it's okay. I mean, that's basically.
I'm sorry I ruined your life.
Like, that's basically
like,
that's basically how it went though.
Yeah,
like
it is.
Like, yeah, like very much summed up was just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna completely ruin your life for literally some of the most selfish I'm not gonna get into details or anything. But like I understand that, like, the Disney show is called Born Again. I don't think it's based on the comic Born Again or the story arc Born Again.
Right. No.
So if you're
no.
if anyone
I would
was
agree.
if anyone was looking for that, any of that to happen or whatever, like, it's not. I don't think it's gonna happen. And if it does, this is when you start to hate her. Just throwing that out there, because it was just, yeah, it was one of them moments to where, like, whenever the Netflix show was happening and all of that, I was very much like, they got Deborah Ann Wool, which I was like perfectly fine with. Like, it's a good thing you got her, because I know what she does. So it's one of them deals where it's like, I want to hate her so bad, but I can't. Like, I would forgive her too. I understand.
Now, something.
Which, by the way, that's another thing that that Frank did, was pretty much pluck Karen Page pretty much out of just obscurity, because she had been mentioned back in the day before Frank had really jumped on, and he kind of gave her more of like that big role.
Yeah. I mean, she had always been part of the supporting cast.
Yeah.
Like, it was. I mean, it started out Matt, Foggy, Karen Page.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, with Spider-Man, it was Peter, Aunt May, J. Jonah Jameson, and Betty Brant, who not only went to high school with Peter, but also worked for the Daily Bugle as well. Something else I want to touch on for some fans who might not be aware, there's actually a strong contingent of, like, crossover fans between, like, Miller's Daredevil and the Ninja Turtles. And the reason for that is Miller's Daredevil was so influential upon Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird during their creation of the Turtles. It's almost recognized as... I'm not sure if it's headcanon at this point or if it's actually canon that the radioactive waste that blinded Matt Murdock is the same radioactive waste that leaked into the sewers to mutate the turtles. Are you familiar with this?
I'm not.
You've never heard this?
No. No, I was today years old.
And I mean, okay, with Daredevil, Miller had the hand. With the Turtles, Eastman and Laird had the foot. You know?
I never pieced that.
You never put that together?
No. Wow. Okay.
That, and I mean, Daredevil was always fighting ninjas and stuff. Who were the Turtles fighting? Even the art style. If you look at 80s era Miller, like from this, put it in black and white, it looks like a Turtles comic from the old school Eastman and Laird.
Yeah, that's true. I'm going to have to dive into that. Like, really dig into that.
So yeah, there you go, Turtles fans. A new level of appreciation. And hopefully for Daredevil fans too, who maybe now have a little bit more impetus to dive into the Turtles. I cannot recommend the early Eastman and Laird stuff enough.
Yeah, and they have volumes where it's pretty much like, don't think about like the I think I showed it off. Well, I've got one right there. I might try to dig it out in a second. But like in volumes 1, 2, 3, 4, and all that stuff. But it's not like these where it's like it collects like the first 6 issues or something like that. Because the Turtles, like, it was supposed to be like a standalone thing. Like, and
Mm.
because it got so popular, they were like, "Hey, we need more," kind of thing. Like, I'm not going to give any type of spoilers or anything like that. But let's just say that originally Shredder was not supposed to be a long term thing. Like,
That's a nice way of putting it. Yeah.
we'll just say that.
And the same thing could be said for the Joker.
Yeah, he absolutely was not supposed to be
Yeah.
a long term thing. But yeah. So yeah, definitely recommend this. Could not recommend it more. Um, like, just if you're not into reading comics or anything, and you've pretty much really just consumed a lot of the other forms of media, such as like movies, TV show, and stuff like that. And if you're into the Daredevil series and you want to read more, that's like, look no further than the Miller run, really, because most of what we see in forms of media, and specifically I'm talking about the Affleck film, and the Netflix/Disney series, it's Miller.
Yes.
Like, in one way or another,
Yep.
it's Miller.
Yeah.
Like, it's just as simple as that.
I mean, in the original Frank Miller Klaus Janson run alone, uh, Matt, he brings in Elektra, he brings in the Kingpin, he introduces Bullseye, um, he meets the Punisher. Like, that was the first time they fought. It was during Miller's run.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so yeah, like, in much the same way that a few years after this, Miller would go on to, in the way that he redefined Daredevil, he also redefined Batman. And a lot of what we think of now when we think of Batman, we can thank Frank Miller for.
Frank Miller is a much more influential person in the comic world than people realize, and that's not me just trying to act like you know I know more than people or whatever. It's just like, I mean, there's people, like I said, there's so many people out there that their only forms of media that they use to consume comic book characters is by movies or TV shows or whatever. And it's like they have no idea that so much of what they're watching in certain things come from like just one or two creators
Mm.
or something. And it's like, to think about Frank Miller, what we know about Daredevil is like that came from Frank Miller. So much of what we know from Batman came from Frank Miller. It's like RoboCop. Like,
Yes,
I mean,
yeah, yeah.
this is not the Frank Miller episode. We're here to talk about Daredevil. But yeah.
Okay, so here's a question. What was the first Daredevil comic you ever read, and when? I mean, I can go first if
Yeah,
we
go
kind of,
first,
okay.
because I mean, I'm trying to think back like what the very first one would have been.
um, I've mentioned this story before. I was, I think, 5 years old. I was having surgery, and whenever I came out of surgery, my grandparents had gone to some drugstore, and my grandfather just went to the spinner rack and just this.
Make the kid happy.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I had read some comics before, but I was not a collector. And so, 5 years old, my grandfather gives me just this brown paper bag full of comics. Um, One of them was a Daredevil comic. And while I knew who he was, I'd never read any of his comics before. And there was also the first Amazing Spider-Man comic I ever owned that I still have from that bag of comics. But yeah, that was the first Daredevil comic I read. And then after that, I got it was actually a book about the comic industry and specifically Miller's impact not just upon the Daredevil title, but the way he changed the comic industry at that time. That was called the Daredevil Chronicles.
Okay. Not gonna lie, I want to say, other than like guest appearances here and there and all that kind of stuff, I genuinely think it was this.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I really can't. Yeah, I can't think of anything before that. Now, I've told you, I can't remember if we covered this in the last episode or not, but we've covered in past episodes. I was more of a DC guy. I really just, and it wasn't, because I was just purposefully steering clear of Marvel. Like, it just so happened to be that's how it played out.
Sure.
That I would consume more DC stuff, and whenever Marvel stuff would come my way, I would just kind of, I'm not too much into that, and I would stick with the DC stuff. And so by the time the early 2000s had rolled around, like by this time I've already read like a few graphic novels here and there and all that kind of stuff. But, and I knew who Daredevil was. And that was basically about as far as it went. My true 100% introduction to the character, like really jumping into the character, was this film.
Okay.
And I remember when the movie was coming out, and we're going to talk about this again, like with the actual episode that we do on this film. But I remember the film coming out. I remember, what little hype was about it that there was and all that kind of stuff. And just being like, okay, Daredevil. I know who he is. Like, it was one of them deals where it's like, oh, yeah, he's the blind guy. Like, that was about as far as it went. He's the blind superhero. And then I watched the movie. And I'm like, I freaking loved the movie whenever it came out. And so going from there, okay, I want to check out comics of him and all that. And I want to say that that's where I started, because I really can't remember like just an actual Daredevil title, not like a team up or not him just kind of guest starring in some other title or whatever, like an actual Daredevil title. I believe it was that.
I don't remember the specific issue number. That was the first issue I read. I know it was in the very early 200s because it was very early 80s. And then not long after that, I got maybe like 3 years after that, 3 or 4 years after that, I'm like 8 or 9. I had gotten an early trade of um, some issues from Miller's run. So like, yeah, the first comic introduced me. That Daredevil Chronicles introduced me to what his run was about and its impact, and then the second actual Daredevil comic I ever read was Prime era, like Miller.
Yeah. Like, like again, I remember being aware of like who he was and all that kind of stuff, to the point to where whenever the movie was coming out and just not really messing with the character a whole lot or anything, I remember at that point in time my almost like my full extent knowledge of the character was whenever the movie was going to be coming out. It was kind of like, isn't he supposed to be wearing yellow? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Wow,
yeah.
dude.
I was like, wow, this is kind of kind of different from what I. But at again, I'm like, oh yeah, he's the blind guy. Like, I knew him from that, and then I jumped on to, I read that, and then just here and there, I would get, by that point in time, it's like I'd pretty much decided, early 20s and all that, to heck with Frank Miller and all that stuff. Like, I don't too much care for him. So I would actually jump all around the Miller run.
Yeah.
and just read other things.
Yeah.
And then slowly started getting more familiar with Miller. I would read a few other things by him. Read 300, really enjoyed it. Like, okay, and didn't really jump into like in it like his RoboCop or anything like that. Like, was really just sticking with like uh the Marvel and DC stuff. And I think like I know you remember, I still very much had the mentality of not liking Miller even whenever DK3 was coming out.
I do.
like,
I do remember. I remember very
like
much.
to the point to where like I was gonna read it just because I had already read, I'd read The Dark Knight Returns, loved it. Strikes Back, I'm not the biggest fan of, not just with the Superman stuff, just in general. I'm not a big fan of Strikes Back. But then whenever DK3 was coming out, I was like, okay, like I'm gonna check this out. And yeah, because you were the one that I would talk to about this. It's like every issue that I would read is like I'm waiting for the sucker punch.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was
Oh,
like,
yeah.
where is it at? How is he gonna make Superman look bad in this? And I think it was issue 4
I think so.
when
Yeah.
he has him get caught like in the
Yeah.
black
Yeah.
matter or whatever.
Yeah. It
It
was like 3 or 4. Something
yeah,
like
something like that. That's whenever I was like, "What? There it is." Like, took him out. He's gonna be. I mean, because they made it out like that stuff that he got trapped in was like game over. You
Oh,
know
yeah.
what I mean? And it's just like, well, that's it. Like, but it's just me being me. I will either hate read or hate watch something. Like, that's just me. Oh
Really?
yeah. Like, like how much worse can this get? And so it was one of them deals where it's like, and also it was just also equal parts of like, I'm like 4 issues in, kind of invested. Like, I do want to kind of see where it's going. And very, very quickly, Superman gets out.
Mm.
So I'm like, okay, he's out. Like, I'll keep reading and everything. And before I knew it, I was at the end, and we see how he actually treated Superman. Pretty much acknowledges that, like, has Batman acknowledge Superman
Yeah.
has been holding back this entire time, like, and all that. And I was just like, I never would have seen that coming, and so I was like, okay. And then you very, very heavily talked about very high praise, Holy Terror. And so I was like, okay, I'll give Holy Terror a shot. And read it and just loved it from start to finish.
Same.
Like one of those deals to where like I told you, like, I sat down, like, I'm not crazy about the format that it's in, and so like I sat down and was like, okay, I'll read part of it or whatever, and then come back to it. And it's like, no, with every page that I just kept, I was like, I'm fully invested. Like, I'm not like, okay, when are they going to wrap this up? Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, I was just like, no, I'm just fully invested. And before I knew it, I'd finished the whole thing, and I think I called you immediately afterwards and was like, I cannot talk highly enough about Holy Terror.
No,
Like,
I love Holy Terror, and I know you're not crazy about the format of like the elongated hardcover books that Miller does now, but as his art has progressed over the years, or degressed, as some might think,
I think it's a little of both.
I feel like now of his later period art, I think Holy Terror is the peak.
Yeah.
Like, because to me, Frank's art only looks off if he's not drawing his own characters. Whenever he's drawing his own characters, yeah, that's like the Miller universe. That's what people look like. That's
Yeah,
what
pretty much.
you know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Well, I was gonna say something else. We'll jump into that whenever we do, eventually talk about Holy Terror in
Yeah.
more detail.
I can't wait.
And all of that. But
We'll have to plan our wardrobe.
yeah. But we have a matching Holy Terror T-shirt.
Well, so like there are only like 3 bits of like Holy Terror merchandise aside from the book itself. There's
Yeah.
the book, big freaking poster, and 2 shirts.
Yeah.
You have one of the shirts. I have both of the shirts.
Yeah.
And the poster.
But I forgot to mention, like, whenever I was getting into, with Frank Miller and all that kind of stuff, that I'd read Dark Knight Returns, I'd read Strikes Back prior to reading Master Race. Was whenever, again, like I'm to the point to where, like, pretty much the only way I can get comics is from Books a Million at this point, as everyone in this area, because they were the only people that was around selling them at the time and all that junk. Um,
And Hastings.
and Hastings. But
Number 2 comic retailer in America at the time.
at the time. But so went to Books a Million. I think we were going to Buffalo Wild Wings that night, like to watch some fights or something like that.
Probably.
And so I live, at the time I lived so far out, like I would just go ahead and come up into town and just find somewhere to be and just be like, I'll just kill time here.
That's what we call it in the South.
Yeah.
Whenever we leave home, we're going to town.
Yeah.
So
No.
I do the same thing.
Like, I've told Emily before, I live in the middle of this city, and I've told Emily before, like, are we going to town for any kind of, and I'll be like, hey, wait a minute. Town is 5 minutes away.
Yeah.
But,
it's like Little House on the Prairie. We're going to town.
But anywho, like, so come up, go to Books a Million and all that. And so I'm sitting there like, okay, let me try to find a comic just to have like some reading material or something like that. Because I had like, it's like an hour and a half or 2 hours to kill, because I just got tired of sitting at the house. And that's whenever I read, with some convincing, All-Star Batman.
Yeah.
So it's like I had always heard, the bad things about it, but I was like, me, I was like, I don't care what I hear. I don't care how much somebody badmouths something or how much somebody praises something. Like, eventually I will consume it and just be like, make my own decision on it and everything. And so I was like, okay, let me check this out. Again, it's like I've got an hour and a half, 2 hours to kill or whatever. Like, I can knock this out. If anything, it'll give us something to talk about also while we're watching the fights and all that, So start reading it. Jim Lee's art, always on point. He's one of my favorite artists.
Especially on point.
And so like, okay, let's check it out. And I start reading it. And the way that I described that to you, I think, was the dialogue was so bad that there was at times where it's like, there was at times whenever I was reading it, I was like, is he trying to destroy his own Batman legacy? Like, that's just genuinely how I felt. And I think the first time I put it down, I was just like, I can't do this. It was when he kicks through the window. And I can't even remember the line. It was
boot copper.
Yeah, eat boot copper or something like that. And or eat glass copper. I can't remember what it was. But it was something that to where, like, I read it and I just got up out of the chair, slid it back on the shelf. Call me Pilate. I've washed my hands of this nonsense. I'm done. And I walked away. But again, it's just me being me. I'm invested at this point.
Better or worse.
Kind of walked around the store. Stupid comic. Grabbed it, went, sat back down, like, okay, let's keep reading and everything. And then the next time that I came close to putting it down, the only thing that kept me going at that point was just like, I'm so close to finishing, let's just finish it. Was whenever they painted themselves yellow.
Yeah.
Because I remember whenever I turned and I saw it, like I closed it and just kind of, opened it back up, like, okay, let's finish it. And then I finished reading it. And yeah, I was like, boy, do I have some stuff to talk to you about, later on that night. And so I read that, and then slowly, like, I started like reading. I would just read more stuff by him. I never really jumped into Sin City. I attempted to get into it. It just wasn't really my thing, and that's just not me knocking it. It's not my cup of tea. But I remember talking on the phone with you that we were, somehow or other, we got to talking about Frank Miller, and by then I'd read this, I'd read that issue, which we're about to talk about here pretty soon. And I remember telling you on the phone, I was like, I used to tell people that I couldn't stand Frank Miller because of the treatment of Superman, like with his Batman stuff and all that kind of stuff. But I was like, at this point, I've read so much of the man's work. And I was like, when I really sat there and thought about it, I was like, I like the majority of it. And so, like, and I told you, I was like,
dang it, I'm a fan.
I was like, I can't really say I don't like him because I like most of what he puts out. Dead gummit, I've got to tell myself I'm a fan of Frank Miller. And so, yeah, that's pretty much whenever I was like, okay, whatever, I'm a fan of him. And whenever I really acknowledged that, like, it kind of really just changed.
It's freeing.
Like, I had changed everything about how I view so much of his work. I mean, I had read, like, Year One, like Batman Year One and all that. Like, yeah. I was like, okay. I was like, look past the Superman stuff and everything like that. And, like, in DK3 really changed the way that I look at, like, a lot of the Superman stuff, especially then whenever he did Superman Year One. Yeah, I'm a fan of the guy. And to the point to where I'm like, I just straight up fanboy about him now at this point.
Well, like, I think it's kind of sad that there was very much a period, and I think if we're not past it, then we're coming out of that period now. But there was very much a time, not that long ago, where it was fashionable, if you're a comic fan, to just hate on Frank Miller.
Mm-hmm.
And the same was true for a long time about Todd McFarlane. And the same was even true for Jack Kirby in the late 70s and early 80s.
Yeah, I mean, and to an extent, there's still, like, jumping on with to Todd, there's still a bunch of people, like, maybe not so much in the comics anymore, but there's still a lot of people that like to hate on Todd just in the fact that, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I like to collect toys. And, and Todd, I, again, don't know if you're aware of this, but Todd has a very lucrative action figure career behind him. And so, like, yeah, something about Todd McFarlane toys. But I mean, obviously I collect a lot of McFarlane stuff, and here recently, like in the toy world, if you're a part of it, we don't know to what extent he's going to fully lose certain things, but Mattel has regained the DC license to do a lot of, like, their like 6-7 inch figures and all that kind of stuff. But Todd still, I think he's still very much going to have, like, the superpowers stuff, like, that's very retro, like, very much modeled after the old Kenner toys whenever we were younger. And he still, like, will be doing, like, he's branched out. He does, like, a lot of, like, it's a line called, like, Movie Maniacs, where he, like, just does, like, little statues of, like, certain movies and stuff like that. He does, like, a lot of, like, I don't know if you guys can see, no, like, this Batman right here. Like, it's Todd McFarlane, no articulation to it. It's really just like a statue and all that. So he does that. Like, I've got that Batman. I've got like a Superman here recently. He's really gotten to where like he does a lot of Marvel statues and stuff. Like you saw the Magneto one that I've
Yeah.
got. He actually has a Daredevil one that I'm wanting to get at some point. He has a Venom, multiple Spider-Man, and all that naturally, and all that. So, but one license that he picked up, I'm just gonna leave this out
Yeah.
because we're fixing to put something else up there.
Whew.
But one thing,
Might want to put your copy up there.
okay, but one thing that like he got another license was he's going to be doing classic Mortal Kombat stuff. And he did a video on his social media, and I was cracking up like there's no tomorrow because I think Todd is freaking hilarious.
Oh yeah,
And
I love the Todd Father.
And and so he's videoing, he's like videoing himself like on his phone and everything like that, and he's like, hey guys, like he's like whispering and stuff. He's like, hey guys, I've got something to show y'all and everything, but don't tell nobody that, like come on, like whatever. He pans the camera around. He's like, I'm going to give you a sneak peek at some new toys that I'm fixing to do and everything. And he starts showing off like some of the Mortal Kombat classic stuff, like Sub-Zero and Scorpion and Liu Kang and all that stuff. And he's like, but if you look right here, like he pans down and there's like a little thing on the table where it says no photography. He's like, it says no photography right here. He's like, but he's like, I'm going to do some photography. He's like, because, he's like, we're McFarlane Toys and I'm McFarlane. So, he's like, and so I was like cracking up at him. So he's going to be doing like the Mortal Kombat stuff, which, and I'm about to get off of this, but I'm a defender of Todd to my core. I just am. And, you look at the comments of like what people like on his Facebook or whatever it was that he did this on, and people are like, you're seeing like the pictures of like the or the video stuff of the Mortal Kombat stuff and everything, and the comment section is just full of people like, well, Todd just can't help but put out like an inferior product, can he? Or like, wow, man, these look like trash, or these look terrible, and this and that. And part of me is kind of like, okay, how much like in the toy world do you actually know versus what are you actually like? Are you just collecting? Do you not know how this stuff works? Like those are prototypes. I can 99.9% can guarantee you that is not the final product that's going to be in a package. Like, get over yourself. And like, again, like, like you said, like it was almost fashionable back in the day to hate Todd and to hate anything that he does. And I think that very much carries on to
it still is in some circles.
Like, I think it very much carries on to where it's like, a lot of action figure collectors is like, oh, we're just going to hate him for the sake of hating him and all that, where, someone who, like me, late 30s, can say that, like, I mean, I still have toys whenever I was a little kid. Like, original Ninja Turtle, like, He-Man stuff and all of that. Like, I still have all of that. So I've been collecting toys as far back as I can remember. And I will tell anybody with absolute confidence, Todd's the best.
Yeah.
Like, that's just all it is to it. Like knowing that he's lost the license for DC or whatever, there was a part of me that absolutely was like, I want him to pick up Marvel. Like, I want him to take that from Hasbro. I just do. Like, I would love to see Todd McFarlane, like, taking on, like, 22 points of articulation, all that kind of stuff and everything. Spider-Man, Daredevil, Wolverine. Like, I want to see all of that, but, whatever. That's just, we're not. But I'm going to defend Todd. Okay, you guys, you'll see in future episodes. I've got they're on the way because they were freshly ordered because I didn't know that they even existed until not too long ago. I've got McFarlane Toys T-shirts on the way.
Nice.
Like, with just like the logo, like the gold label, the Spawn logo, and everything. I've got where it says like McFarlane Toys. There's another one like on some of them it says like McFarlane Platinum Edition and all that kind of stuff. Like I've got T-shirts of that on the way because I love Todd like there's no tomorrow. But with we're gonna do another episode eventually just on Todd, and you'll hear us just absolutely
Todd,
fanboy
Spawn stuff.
Yeah, just fanboy completely over Todd and all that kind of stuff. But so the next thing that we're going to discuss is this right here, that you and I, and you didn't give me this idea upon reading it. You were just basically like, have you read this issue? And I said, no, I hadn't. Because this was still during my I hate Frank Miller phase. Right. So it's like, of course I haven't read that. Why would I read that? Like, you know what I mean? And so you were like, I need you to read it. And I was like, okay, whatever. I'll read it. And you let me borrow your issue. Yeah. Which is beat up like there's no tomorrow.
My copy is completely beat up. There's like torn edges of the cover.
The camera may not do it justice, but trust me, in person, there's a difference between these two issues.
This thing is beat up to crap and back, and I love it so much. But like you can see the spines rolled, tears along the cover, water stains. I found this in my childhood comic shop. They had 25-cent boxes, 50-cent boxes, dollar boxes, and the guy who ran the comic shop was my PE coach and basketball coach. Hi, Alan, and shout out Major League. Love him.
At the time of this recording, I was just there yesterday.
I'll be going there probably later today. But this was in like the 25 or 50-cent bin for obvious reasons. It's just beat to crap. And I saw it, and I was aware of the significance of the issue. And I was like, there's no way, even with its condition, that this is just, 25, 50 cents. And I brought it to the guy behind the counter, and he's like, oh, yeah. He's like, man, that thing's beat up. He's like, just take it. So,
get it out of my sight.
And I just remember just like excitedly, I think I read this like in my car the first time, like in the parking lot.
Yeah.
And to me, this is what I regard as the single greatest issue of any comic that I have read. If you want to know how good comics can be from the standpoint of writing, art, dialogue, narration, this is basically a 32-page movie.
It's a 32-page movie script that has images on it.
Yeah. But by the way, if you can't read it, this is Daredevil 181 from 1982. Cannot recommend enough. And so, continue.
But like you just said, like you didn't plant that idea into my head, because a lot of times, somebody can say something and people can take that saying and just kind of run with it. You know what I mean? And so you were just basically like, I need you to read it. I was like, okay. And so you were like, I have a copy. I'll let you borrow it. Just read it. Tell me what you think. Okay. So I got it, read it, and called you after I read it. And I'm the one that actually volunteered to you. I said, this may be the best single issue of a comic I've ever read in my life. And you were like, I feel the exact same way. Yeah. And so I was like, yeah, and we talked about it. We broke it down, talked about like how great it was and all that kind of stuff. And, here, then the funny part comes in is that, you said something along the lines of like, well, it looks like you're going to have to get your own copy now. And I was like, it's already ordered.
Yeah.
like it shipped 10 minutes before I called you. Like it's on the way. And what's even funnier is that mine came in, and then I would rub it in your face where it's like, I've got them both. Yeah, I mean, just like, I was just being a dick about it. I'm not gonna lie, because you would call and like, "Oh, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, just holding these 2 copies of Daredevil 181," and you would be like, "Bring me my issue back."
uh, I do want to show some stuff, and I touched on this earlier with like
They have done reprintings of this, by
oh
the
yeah
way.
yeah
So
yeah
if you don't want to have like just an older beat down copy or whatever like that, because, well, I mean, it is what it is, because it's a very iconic issue and all that. So to find like an original one in very good condition, you're going to pay. I'm not an obscenely great amount of money,
no
but it's going to be a little bit more expensive than just going and buying a regular comic. But they have done reprints of it and all that, which are would be easier and probably cheaper to get and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, there you go.
but yeah like I just want to highlight some things. I mentioned earlier Miller's like silent panels, almost like a ballet, and hopefully you can see here the only words are the sound effects. So again, it's like a movie or a screenplay, no dialogue. The only words are the sound effects, and that continues for the entire next page. I mean, this is it. It makes perfect sense to me that Miller would go on to work in Hollywood and to co-direct and direct himself, because the seeds were sown here. So, Daredevil 181. Yeah, it's the single greatest issue ever.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with it. I love this issue. It says on there, not gonna lie, it's been out since the early '80s. Like, I'm not worried about spoilers. I mean, it's on the cover. It said Bullseye versus Elektra, one wins, one dies. Like, I know that so many people, would like, and to an extent, it kind of proves the point where it's like, it's comics, nobody really stays dead or anything like that. You know what I mean? But so I'm sure there were some people that went into this issue just kind of like, oh yeah, right. Like, you know what I mean? And then by the time it gets to the end of it, it's like, no, one dies.
Yeah.
Oh dang. And yeah,
and she stayed dead for quite a while.
she did. To the point to where, I told you that this is I was aware of the image of it, just not like actually reading the comic or anything. But I told you yesterday, I think, I can't remember when it was, whenever we were talking about the movie, that whenever Bullseye fights Elektra in the film and he stabs her, like the blade like pokes out like the back of her uniform, like kind of makes it come out and everything. And I remember whenever I first watched the movie, not knowing about that issue because I had never read it. I remember, just one of them deals. It was like it's a very strange artistic choice, like, you know what I mean. And then years later, again finally being able to consume comics, and by then it was much easier to like access like the internet and all that kind of stuff, just be able to look up stuff and everything. Is whenever I saw the image of it, and it was just like, like that's why it was in there like that.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure we'll touch on this more whenever we go into the movie. By the way, the guy who's interviewing Bullseye right before he breaks out it's a guy named Tom Snyder. That was a real person. He was a real journalist, like television journalist. Actually interviewed Charles Manson.
Okay.
And that's a really good interview on YouTube. But yeah, this scene where Daredevil and Elektra fight, like
Bullseye.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Elektra and Bullseye, like the dialogue is taken directly from the comic. The whole "You're good, baby, but me, I'm magic." Yeah. And there we see fuck it. Sorry. Screw it. I will Yeah. There we go.
But yeah, that's the very iconic image that I had seen.
And
You know,
I just committed like the sin of sins. You realize that?
yeah,
Like,
because you folded
yes.
it. But hey, that's okay. It's been beat up, so
Yeah.
it's not like it's not used to it. But yeah, both of us pretty much have the same idea. It's we both view it as the single greatest issue ever written. Everything about it, the dialogue, the setup to it, like it was almost like whenever I sat down and just started reading it, it's like, oh, like I don't want to sound too much like a fanboy, but it's like when I started reading it, it's like very quickly on, I was just like, this isn't a normal issue. Like there's something special about this one.
Hmm.
And finished it, and it was almost as if like, yeah, I was like, it was like very very quickly, I was just like, this may be the best issue of a comic book I've ever read in my life. And yeah, there isn't a single issue out there that even comes close to that one, in my opinion. And I like, just to let you guys know how good that is. Again, this was during my time of hating Frank Miller.
Yeah.
So for me to openly be like, I do not like him, I do not like his art style, I do not like this, just everything about Frank Miller, I'm like, I do not like him. And then to read that issue and to just openly admit this may be the best single issue I've ever read in my life, that should let you know. Because anyone who knows me knows whenever Mikey decides to hold a grudge on something, like, I hold it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so to me to be like, oh, to go from, hey, have you read this issue? Like, who wrote it? Frank Miller? Well, of course I haven't read that. Why would I read that? I hate Frank Miller. To, that's the best single issue I've ever read. I've already ordered my own copy, and I'm going to hold your copy hostage just to make you mad. Like, you know what I mean?
And I also find it very rewarding personally and amusing that we both have refrigerator magnets
Yes.
of the
Of
cover
that
of this issue.
Like, yeah, like easily the best single issue I've ever read. Could not recommend it more. Not just that issue, but The Man Without Fear. Overall, Frank Miller's run, everything about what Frank Miller has done with Daredevil. Daredevil wouldn't exist the way that we know him if it wasn't for Frank Miller. That's just all it is to it.
And as groundbreaking and just kind of standard setting as the initial run was, without going into any spoilers, Frank did it again with the Born Again storyline.
Mm-hmm.
He took everything he had built, tore it down, and rebuilt it.
And that's what he wanted, and did it with intention.
Yes!
And was basically like, oh, this thing that I essentially saved and turned into one of y'all's best things, yeah, I'm about to destroy that. And then turn around and build it back up.
Because I can.
Because I can.
Because I'm Frank Miller.
Well, yeah, so I don't have a whole lot else other to say without, I'll have other stuff to say when we really do like a full-on deep dive into like Frank Miller's stuff and everything. But as far as like, and I know we covered a lot of ground today. We covered way more than really just talking about that particular story, The Man Without Fear. But yeah, man. Like, I haven't checked out anything new from Daredevil yet. Like, I'm waiting. Well, like the TV show. Like, I'm waiting for it to build up a little bit before I binge it or anything. I'm not concerned about spoilers. I've never been concerned about spoilers. So,
I actually want to bring up something. I was talking to a friend of ours. Hi, Rich. And
what's up, Rich?
He asked me, this is like day before yesterday. He's like, hey, have you seen any of Born Again? I was like, no, I haven't yet. He's like, dude, he's like, I don't know how you feel about Charlie Cox. He's like, but with this, he was already good. He's like, I think Charlie Cox just became the best actor in the MCU. And I was like, whenever Vincent D'Onofrio is right there, that's saying something.
Yeah, yeah, that's saying something. Like I'm aware. I'm already aware of what it is. I'm not gonna go into detail with it or anything, but yeah, I pretty much know what Rich is talking about.
Okay,
And
well, don't
yeah,
tell me.
I haven't seen any clips of it or anything, but I am aware of it, and
If
I'm looking forward to seeing it.
if, if anybody doesn't know, uh, we differ a lot on a lot of stuff. Believe it or not, I know we seem to be pretty lockstep on this show, but he loves spoilers. I hate spoilers. So
Yeah, I mean, let me put it to you like how I am with spoilers, just to let y'all know, is that back whenever Game of Thrones was doing its thing, and it was the big thing that everyone was talking about. I think we all remember whenever I can't remember which season it was, either season 7 or 8. I think it was season 7. Whenever season 7, just before the first episode premiered, the entire script leaked online. And, there were so many people that was like, oh my God, like we need to, like, because there was people that was kind of talking about it here and there and everything. And there were so many people that was trying to avoid it and all that kind of stuff. I went and downloaded the pictures. And before episode 1 had even aired, I read it. Knew everything that was going to happen and didn't bother me at all. And like, if anything, it gave me some power because when somebody would go to tick me off, I'd sit there and be like, "I'm about to start telling you what happens," and they'd be like, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Like episode 3 at the 22-minute mark, and they're like, "No, no, no, no," like, and I would just, God, I would mess with them like there's no tomorrow. But and I remember having a discussion with I think it was over the Game of Thrones stuff. One of our friends, Ryan,
mm,
he said one time, because I was just talking about it or whatever, and I said something about like I'm not waiting for that crap. Like I'll just look it up. Like it's not that big of a deal. And well, you've heard me say before, like you'll be telling me about a show or a movie or something, and I'll ask you a question or whatever, and you'd be like, I don't want to tell you. I'm like, I'm just gonna Google it after I get off the phone with you. Go ahead and tell me.
yeah.
Like, and he said something about like, uh, he said, why do you want to ruin it for yourself by just looking it up? And I'm like, why do you want to make yourself intentionally suffer by not knowing what happens? Like, I'm like, there's two sides to this coin, buddy. Like whatever it is, what it is. I've never cared about spoilers. Yeah, I've just never cared. But yeah, so I'm aware of what happens, even though we're only 2 episodes in, because they dropped 2 episodes day one at the
Mm,
time of this recording, and then it's going to be like 1 episode a week moving forward until the season's over with. And yeah, I'm talking like within 3 hours of it premiering, like I knew what happens. And I was
okay.
just like, okay, I'll still check it out.
No, no, I will definitely check it out. But as you said, the Miller stuff has been collected in various forms. I believe this is available in trade and hardcover and single issues. Um,
I don't know if you guys can see, but I have the single issues there.
his original Daredevil run has been collected in, of course, single issues, trades, and there's an omnibus of, I think it's called like the Daredevil and Elektra omnibus.
Yeah, something like that.
And
It's pretty pricey. Just throwing that out there.
is it really?
Yeah.
I thought it was relatively cheap for an omnibus, but yeah, this stuff is readily available. Marvel Unlimited, you can check it out there. Um, but no, this is seminal work from one of the leading artists responsible for bringing comics out of the Silver Age and making them more palatable for older readers, mature readers. He didn't dumb things down. He changed the visual language and just the language of comics. Influenced by manga, so yeah, influenced by pulp and manga, made things his own, and we're all better for it. So
The comic industry sure is.
yeah,
Like he's he's definitely one of the most influential people industry wide.
oh yeah,
But yeah, so I pretty much don't have anything else to say about it really because again, like I mean, I've got plenty more to say, but
yeah.
that's future episodes where we're going to talk about Miller and certain works of his that we're going to pick out and all of that kind of stuff. But as far as
It's gonna
this,
be great.
oh yeah, as far as this right here, I think I'm pretty much,
Yeah,
I think we're pretty much done. So, alrighty, guys, check out Miller's run and all that. The artwork can be, hit or miss for certain people and everything, but the story itself is fantastic. Couldn't recommend it more. Do the whole like and subscribe thing. It would really help us out and all that kind of stuff. Would really appreciate it. So, alright, guys, on the next episode, which, already gave you a glimpse behind the curtain. So as soon as we say we're done here, we're just going to start recording again. We're talking about this and the director's cut, the Ben Affleck Daredevil film. So, alrighty, guys, we will catch y'all for that. I'm Kal.
I'm Ian.
We'll catch y'all next time.